Well, new information coming in today on reports that the Obama administration may be looking into ways to allow thousands of illegal immigrants to stay in the United States without the approval of Congress. Fox News obtaining an internal memo from a group within the Department of Homeland Security called U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. This memo reads in part, quote, "In the absence of comprehensive immigration reform, citizenship and immigration can extend benefits and protections to many individuals and groups by issuing new guidance and regulations. This would allow thousands of individuals to become lawful permanent residents." Now, the agency behind the memo says this is not a new policy or a proposal exactly, just an exchange of ideas. But could the Obama administration really allow this to happen? What critics call a grant of amnesty, essentially, to thousands or perhaps millions of illegals, if it is so inclined. Joining me now, Fox News legal analyst Peter Johnson, Jr. All right, Peter, so this has been something, just so our viewers know, the background to this. For weeks, a group of Republican senators have been sending letters to DHS saying, we understand you are planning on granting some form of amnesty to some untold number of illegals, bypassing Congress altogether. That's not okay. Please tell us whether that is in fact your plan. Totally blown off. DHS hasn't responded to them. Now we get our hands on this memo from an agency within the DHS talking about creating, basically allowing thousands of individuals to become lawful permanent residents without including Congress.
Yeah, it's a troubling confirmation of their worst fears, and there have been denials as to this whole stratagem, and there's still denials as to this plan. They say, well, we're just talking about this, but it's a long memo, and it's a detailed memo. And what it would do is override the will of the Congress. They're saying we have the capacity as an arm of the White House, as the executive branch, to do what we need to do, the same way that they made arguments in Arizona that we occupy the sphere of immigration in this country. We make these decisions. They're saying we can do this by administrative fiat, that we can make decisions about something called deferred action, where they say if someone has overstayed their welcome in this country or they're here illegally, they defer action on them in terms of their deportation.
And that's usually done on a case-by-case basis. So if you have somebody where there are humanitarian concerns or something like that, the government has the discretion to do that. But this seems to be something much bigger and more sweeping.
Well, this is a wholesale effort to include more people in the American scene. And not engage in deportation, but rather engage in importation of a lot of the people who don't necessarily belong in this country.
And normally, if they wanted to do something like this, they would have to go through the U.S. Congress. This is why, we just talked about this, about the fact that President Obama wanted to have some sort of comprehensive immigration reform, which might include a pathway to citizenship for the illegals who are here, and it's gotten tabled. There's not support in the U.S. Congress for it. And so is the question that they're basically going to say, we don't need the U.S. Congress.
Well, it's an expansion of the executive branch's power at the, at the diminution of the legislative branch. And you look back at our history, go back to 1986, the Immigration Reform Act, the Reagan Act, where there was amnesty for people that had been in this country continuously since 1982. That was an act of Congress signed by the President. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of hearings held with regard to that bill. That bill was 5 years in the pipeline. And so now when you get some bureaucrats, some technocrats, some people in an agency that most people have never even heard of, saying, well, there are ways to flout the law as it exists. There are ways to create a path to citizenship for hundreds of thousands of people without an act of Congress signed by the President. After they deny that there's such a plan in place or that it's being considered, that is troubling.
Can they do this legally, Peter? Because I'll tell you, people look at this administration, the Bush administration, a lot of criticism for seizing a lot of executive power. Under President Obama, we have seen just recently the recess appointment of Donald Berwick, who was very controversial to head up Medicare and Medicaid. Basically, the supporters of the administration coming out and saying, oh, he wasn't going to get confirmed by Congress, so, why bother with a hearing? You know, like, we'll just put him in a recess appointment without ever even having him scheduled for a hearing. Then you've got, they weren't going to get cap and trade through the U.S. Senate, and so now they're looking to the EPA to basically just crack down on regulations. And now you've got immigration reform, which they cannot get through the U.S. Congress. And now we find out that this agency within DHS is now considering doing it just from the exec. If this had been President Bush, you have to ask yourself whether the outcry would have been much louder.
Oh, of course. And unfortunately, in my opinion, it's an affirmation of a lot of our worst fears about their propensities, their interest in huge government. And we've seen it affirmed in the Arizona decision, where they say, listen, we're in charge of this area. We basically have the ability under the Constitution and under federal law to do what we think we need to do in terms of immigration policy. This is part and parcel of what they do or they choose not to do. In the Arizona lawsuit, they make an effort to say, no, we're trying to protect the borders. We're trying to ensure that people are not working illegally. We're trying to do all of these things. But then you see this very specific, detail, articulated effort in a 50-something page memo to say, well, here's how we can get around it, and here's how we can get around it. And we don't have to tell Congress, and we can do it on our own. They will continue to deny it, but the proof is in the pudding.
Well, if they do it, if they do it, there's no denying it.
And the proof is in this document, and thank God it's come out, because this debate needs to be held.
Yeah, and we'll find out, whether they do it one way or the other, because this is not the kind of thing you can keep secret if, in fact, it does become policy.
Absolutely.
Peter, thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Likewise.